Hello, dear friends. What a mental masturbation some people do, imagining a third world war of NATO against Russia and China, with India, Turkey, Japan, South Korea, Australia, etc. The problem is that there would be no victors. According to the Oxford Dictionary, a mental straw is an unsubstantiated hypothesis or speculation that is a product of a person's imagination or fantasy. And according to Wikipedia, it is an idea or assertion of a speculative or theoretical nature with no practical purpose other than to offer pleasure to the person to whom it has occurred. The expression Byzantine discussion on Byzantine arguments means a useless discussion or argument in which each side can never get to prove its assertions to the opposite side. Opinion piece. Pleiadians once want peace. Repeat. Pleiadians want peace. Meeting with Russian military commanders. They advise against full-scale war. This war could end quickly. They want to create a third world war. This will not become a wild conflict. Neither Putin is a saint nor Zelenski is a hero. Both have a very controversial past. Things have to come to a head. Putin succumbed to pressure from his advisors. Russia's targets are Lugansk and Donetsk. His main goal is to demilitarize Ukraine. He chose the moment of maximum weakness of the West. Good and evil are very much entangled in this conflict. There is a great deal of disinformation and propagandizing. A peace proposal could work with common sense. The bad guys will do everything they can to make the negotiation fail. Edgar Cayce, Medjugorje and Fatima prophesied role of Russia. Fatima priest says, in quotes, "End times involve Russia and Ukraine." Let's start. The 2012 portal of the Intelligence Center for the Victory of Light Intelligence has just published an updated message of the war in Ukraine written by contactee Cobra that might clarify some points about the truth that they are not hiding, although these opinions are not mine but Cobra's. After the message, I will give my views trying to be even-handed and objective. There were urgent meetings between the Pleiadians and the Russian military high command in the last days before the war broke out, and the Pleiadians have advised against the large-scale Russian military operation in Ukraine. From their perspective, the main objectives could be achieved by Russian peacekeepers in Lugansk and Donetsk, refusing to react to provocations backed by the mischief makers in the West, who want to create the Third World War to fulfill their end-time prophecies. Putin has succumbed to pressure from some of his advisors controlled by the mischief makers in the Russian military of the Russian Orthodox Church, and the mischief makers got the war they wanted, but it will not turn out as they had planned. Putin has chosen the moment of maximum weakness of the West by attacking with a planet Pluto badly aspected for the US. Its main goal is to demilitarize Ukraine to protect Russia from immediate military threats, cleanse dangerous biolabs, and purge Ukraine of neo-Nazi elements. Factions. There are many factions within Ukraine with strong neo-Nazi bent that have committed serious crimes, often with the tacit approval of the Ukrainian government. The mischievous are influencing Ukraine with their proxies. The Russian minority in Ukraine is being harassed to great extent. Sources have confirmed that the Russian military is not directly attacking civilians in this war, and that there is a great deal of disinformation spread through the media. The sources have also stated that the goal of the Russian army is not to overthrow Zelensky, and that the Russian army will withdraw as soon as the strategic objectives listed above are achieved, which is in approximately 2 weeks according to their estimate. If the Western allies controlled by the bad guys fail to escalate the situation further, peace in the region could realistically be achieved in a few weeks. There are peace talks scheduled for today. Peace proposal. Positive sources have drafted a peace proposal that could work if people on both sides use common sense and are willing to reach rational compromise. Diplomatic personnel reading this can forward this proposal to the relevant parties. Ukraine could be accepted into the European Union and Zelensky remain as legitimately elected president, but Ukraine should stay out of NATO forever, remain militarily neutral like Switzerland, and should cease all foreign military aid to Ukraine as per NATO's 1990 guarantees of non-membership in eastward expansion. The Ukrainian government should ban all neo-Nazi organizations on its territory, and the rights of the Russian minority in Ukraine should be respected. Crimea should be recognized internationally as part of Russian territory, according to the 2014 referendum on the status of Crimea. Donetsk and Lugansk should be internationally recognized as sovereign independent countries, according to the 2014 referendum on the status of Donbas. As soon as the above conditions are met, the entire Russian army should immediately leave the rest of the Ukrainian territory. As soon as that happens, all international sanctions against Russia should be cancelled and normal international relations should resume. It is unlikely that reason will win out because the bad guys would do everything possible to undermine any peace proposal, but it is worth a try. However, financial sanctions against Russia would accelerate the development of alternative payment systems such as China's SIPS and Russia's SPFS, which would weaken the already declining petrodollar and revitalize the BRICS alliance. Meditation for peace in Ukraine. It is still urgently needed every 4 hours, and the forces of light ask as many people as possible to participate. God wants peace, and peace it shall be. Victory of the light. Pleiadians. In ufology, the Pleiadians are a race of extraterrestrial beings from the Pleiades, a cluster of stars in the constellation Taurus. Those contacted with these beings described them as harmonious, luminous, and benefactors of humankind, long associated with spirituality and non-intervention. For ufology, Pleiadians as a race are catalogued as Nordic beings, since they resemble this terrestrial racial typology by having blonde hair, light or white complexion, blue eyes, and tall stature. These Nordics, in turn, are beings of human characteristics. According to contactees, some Pleiadians are members of other benevolent civilizations belong to the Andromeda Council, which opposes the Orion Group and the Alpha Draconis Empire. This occurred after the Orion War. As a result of the bloody wars in the Lyran system singular, the Lyrans were forced to leave their solar system and colonize the galaxy in search of a new home, and the Lyran colonists would become Pleiadians by settling in the Pleiades system, in the constellation of Taurus. Since the beginning of the Lyran War, the Pleiadians stayed on Era, learning from other benevolent races such as the Andromedans and the Arcturians. Types of Pleiadians. Preston B. Nichols, in his book Contact with the Pleiades, explains that there are three groups of Pleiadians. First, Aryan Pleiadians, from which the term Aryan comes. They are philosophers, thinkers, and dreamers. Some of them will never fight under any circumstances. Second, Pleiadians of Alderon are beings of action. They can also be reflective, but their orientation is to do things. They are like a middle ground between Aryan philosophers and the warrior Pleiadians. Third, Pleiadians of Aldebaran. They are usually called the negative Pleiadians. They are the ones who contacted Hitler through Maria Orsic and induced him to protect and promote the Aryan race. They thought they were protecting their brethren and have been known to have taken their intentions to extreme points on occasions. According to Preston B. Nichols, although the Aldebaran beings are Pleiadians, they are closer to the Orion group. They do not religiously follow the non-interference code of the other Pleiadian groups and could come to this planet to rescue a Pleiadian belonging to either of the two groups. Appearance and characteristics. They are humanoid beings very similar to humans. They are humanoid beings very similar with only anatomical differences in the head, hands, and the ears. First, features similar to the Nordic Scandinavian people of Northern Europe. Second, well-formed body structure. Third, tight and shiny costumes of ancient military or naval style. Fourth, approximate height between 190 and 210 meters. 5. Long blonde hair and blue or golden eyes larger than normal. 6. Male and female genders, although the appearance is androgynous. 7. Their skin would be between pale white to a more caramel tone, and sometimes they are blue. Prophecies. First, Mike Adams says that the economic suicide of the West is already underway. Second, JFK Jr. says the how will be difficult for most to understand. Focus on the why. The when is now. Third, a Fatima priest says in quotes, the end times involve Russia and Ukraine, and that the tipping point has arrived. Fourth, Edgar Cayce, Medjugorje and Fatima all prophesied that Russia would save humankind during the end times. 5. In 1944, Edgar Cayce prophesied that Russia would help prevent the destruction of humankind. He foresaw a future world financial crisis and pointed to Russia as the thorn in the side of the financial powers that were organizing against the good of humanity, describing Russia's role as the hope of the world. 6. In October 1981, Our Lady of Medjugorje revealed her prophecy of Russia to 6 young children. He said that Russia will come to glorify God more. The West will make civilization progress, but without God, and will act as its own creator. 7th. At Fatima, in 1917, the operation had mandated the consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, which Pope John Paul II took very seriously after his near-fatal shooting, and which he completed on March 24, 1984. This was quickly followed by the collapse of the communist regime in Poland in 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the end of the Soviet Union on Christmas Day in 1991. My point of view. The Ukrainian war has many valid readings because it is a multidimensional conflict, and the same effect can be produced by multiple concomitant causes. But we don't know the whole truth because the first victim of a war is always the truth, due to the fact that both sides emit propaganda to try to harm their enemy. Some people try to interpret this conflict as if it were a social game or a Hollywood movie, where the good guys and the bad guys are clearly defined, but all cats are brown at night, and in a war there are no saints when there is collateral damage of innocent victims. Rather, there are bad guys and regular guys, and the only good guys will be the innocent citizens who suffer the consequences. TV says there are two sides, Russia and Ukraine, but the two real sides are the controllers and the innocent humanity. I see controllers in both countries, and also innocent humanity in both territories. This lack of information makes us constantly rack our brains trying to figure out the reasons for each. The alleged biological labs found would not explain everything, because there is more to this than we know. Some make Putin a saint, and others make Zelensky a hero. But Putin put in jail Russians who were peacefully demonstrating for peace, and Zelensky has many accusations of corruption and capital evasion to tax havens like Costa Rica. Putin is not a little sister of charity because he was a colonel in the KGB, and Zelensky better not talk about because there is no way to catch him. Abandon the childish mentality of looking for good guys and bad guys because there are only bastard interests. Forecasts. Regarding the forecasts, some believe that this will calm down when the balsamic Ides of March come in from the 15th, but especially the 18th, which is the full moon. Others believe that the armistice would come from the Jade conjunction of April 12th, and the most pessimists believe that this would become a war of attrition of Russia and the West, as in Vietnam or Afghanistan, which would awaken both sides and benefit China to impose its new communist world order on a world ruined by war. Supporters of the latter thesis argue that Russia couldn't use heavy weaponry to conquer Ukrainian cities, but would have to go door to door with the risk of snipers everywhere, and we already know how complicated that would be. It is true that some Ukrainians of Russian origin have welcomed Russian soldiers with flowers, but there are Ukrainians who hate them to death. In fact, isolating Russia could only harm the European economy and strengthen the Sino-Russian bloc to become a dominant world power in the future. In fact, the German government itself has said that isolating Russia is like shooting oneself in the foot. China and Russia, the former communist comrades, have become allies again in a very different war, the trade war against the US. Today, Russia and China have what they call a strategic partnership. There are many things Moscow and Beijing work together on, but defense and trade are at the center of it all. In exchange for Russia's valuable resources, China has been providing its neighbor with advanced machinery and technology. Reset models. Both Russia and China voted against the wacky reset proposed by the Davos Forum, but with the intention of imposing their own particular model, which is very different. The Russian model is traditionalist, with a lot of respect for the family, religion, and the traditions of the Russian motherland. The Chinese model is more authoritarian, and its objective is to impose the totalitarian world regime with communism as a reference point and capitalism to justify inequality. The elitist model of the Davos Forum is to return to a feudal system with serfs of the club led by a few rich and stupid people. None of these three models respects what all awakened beings seek: personal freedom, individual sovereignty, and our birthright to spiritual evolution granted by our Creator, except the positive financial restart model of the Earth Alliance, championed by the White Hats. But this coalition is so secret and so hidden that many doubt its existence, although I have faith in it because it is backed by those above and because it coincides with the Creator's plan. It is said that Xi Jinping would sponsor the positive reset in freedom once the CCP falls, but that remains to be seen, even though the bankruptcy of the Chinese economy due to the crisis of Evergrande and other immobiliars could cause the fall of communism. But no one knows what will happen, and therefore we can only trust that the divine plan will be fulfilled. It is hard for me to think of Putin or Xi Jinping as the champions of freedom, although one never knows. Agrees. With respect to how right each of the warring sides may be, I am sure that each of them has reason to feel aggrieved by the opposing side. Ukraine is not alien to Russia, because the historical origin of Russia is not in Moscow or St. Petersburg, but in Kiev. The problem was when Stalin starved 10 million Ukrainians to death in the famous Holodomor by seizing their crops, because Ukraine is the most fertile soil in Russia. This genocide aroused an ancestral hatred of Ukrainians towards their Russian brothers, and I say brothers because they share the same culture and religion of Byzantine origin before the fall of Constantinople by the Ottoman Empire. The depopulation caused by Stalin forced many Russians to emigrate to Ukraine to cultivate the lands that had been left vacant, but it also cultivated hatred between both communities, to the extent that the Ukrainian government built dams to leave Russian irrigators without water and caused their starvation, apart from human rights violations of Russian Ukrainian citizens that sowed even more hatred. Ukraine has the most beautiful women in Europe, but they never smile because the country has lived bitterly and with a lack of empathy for people and animals. The mafia has been rampant in this country, taking advantage of its strategic location for all kinds of illicit trafficking. The conflict could have been avoided through dialogue, but both sides hate each other too much to be able to dialogue, and in the end stupidity has triumphed. That is why I saw that the devil is galloping at us in this country, so conflictive and lacking in common sense. News. First, United Nations General Assembly calls for immediate withdrawal of Russian forces in Ukraine. Second, War Crimes Tribunal prosecutor open investigation into Ukraine. Third, US delays missile test to ease nuclear tension with Russia. Fourth, White House discourages Americans from going to Ukraine to fight. 5. NATO says no need to raise nuclear alert. 6. Ukraine and Russia will continue negotiations on Thursday on ending the war. Russia. First, Russia begins shelling Kiev, whose television tower was hit by a missile, and Ukrainian television channels stopped transmitting, although the West was taken by the second city of this nation, Kharkov. Second, resistance stalls the Russian convoys' advance toward Kiev, according to the Pentagon. Third, Russian troops enter the strategic Black Sea port city of Kherson. Fourth, Ukrainian president declares he's ready to negotiate with Putin. Fifth, Russia says it has lost 498 soldiers in Ukraine. Sixth, SWIFT system waits to disconnect Russian banks as security platforms cut ties with Moscow. Seventh, Russia holds China's SIPS system in case of total financial exclusion. Eighth, Ukrainian cyber-resistant group targets Russian power grids and railroads. Ninth, besieged Ukrainian cities prepare for more Russian attacks with fire's resistance. 10. Ukraine teaches civilians how to make and use Molotov cocktails against Russian military vehicles. 11. Already Russians and Belarusians fatalities in Europe from hate attacks. 12. Sweden mobilizes fighter jets following an alleged Russian airspace violation. 13. Russian billionaires move superyachts to Maldives as sanctions tighten. Refugees. First, already nearly 700,000 Ukrainian refugees in 5 days of war. Second, 12 million people will need humanitarian aid in Ukraine. Third, massive mobilization of volunteers to help Ukrainian refugees. Fourth, Russia announces the formation of humanitarian convoys to help the population of Ukraine. Fifth, Arab refugees see double standards in Europe's embrace of Ukrainians. Economy. First, the stock market stays in the red and Wall Street closes sharply lower. Second, banks brace for cyber attacks after latest Russia sanctions. Third, the US cannot sanction Russian energy without raising systemic collapse, according to Luke Gromen. Europe. First, European Union excludes 7 Russian banks from SWIFT but spares energy banks. Second, Europe could shoot itself in the foot with sanctions against Russia. Third, German finance minister, in quotes, we have to make sure that we do not impose sanctions that we ourselves wouldn't be able to withstand. Fourth, sanctions against Russia could lead Europe into a historic recession. 5. The European Parliament calls for Ukraine to become a candidate to the European Union. 6. War exposes Hungary as the weak spot for European bonds. 7. The Allies announced the release of 60 million barrels of oil from the reserves. Markets. First, when Bitcoin disappears, the cryptocurrency market would collapse because virtually everything is still tied to Bitcoin, which means that Ether would also fall. Second, Russia and China are about to launch gold-backed digital currencies, which could undermine the dollar and disrupt the current financial system. Third, the Ukraine conflict is contributing to some of the highest prices in history for commodities, such as oil, wheat and fertilizer, affecting a global economy that was already experiencing very high inflation. Fourth, Turkey refuses to get involved in sanctions against Russia. 5. Mexico declines to join sanctions against Russia. Russia. First, on Tuesday, March 1st, Putin announced Russia's independence from the US dollar. Second, it was said that the ruble would be backed by gold on the international market on Thursday, March 3rd. Third, also on Thursday, March 3rd, the 1871 Act of England could cease to exist through the official completion of the bankruptcy of the City of London, the Vatican, and Washington, D.C. Fourth, Russian banks are on high alert for cyber attacks. 5. Russia reported massive outages on social media platforms, banks, and mobile operators on Tuesday, March 1st. 6. Russia will continue its operation in Ukraine until it achieves its objectives. 7th. Blocked anonymous site after declaring its cyber war against Russia. 8. Russia seeks to stem investors' stampede as sanctions hit its economy. 9. Temporary economic measures to ensure the country's financial stability. 10th. Putin signs decree banning leaving Russia with more than $10,000 in foreign currency. China. China says it will not join sanctions against Russia and will maintain normal trade relations. Second, Beijing's psychological warfare against Taiwan intensifies after the conflict in Ukraine. Third, China was moving toward a Republican government if they are not already. Xi had to get rid of the Chinese Communist Party and allow China to become a democracy in order to participate in the global financial reset. 4. In 2008, China was already part of the original BRICS alliance that assessed the currencies of 209 countries to be backed by gold and assets. There was an air war from control of space between the US, Taiwan, Japan, Russia, India, and China. Xi then led in ground forces to extract the CCP. Cyber attacks. First, the island state of Tasmania, Australia, is largely offline after an incident that affected fiber optic cables to the mainland. Second, Indo-Pacific, an incident has affected fiber optic cables to the Apple Islands in the Indo-Pacific. Third, cargo ship with 4,000 luxury car sinks in the Atlantic Ocean. 4. On February 25, satellites went down in Germany and there were power outages. 5. France confirmed that social media channels were suspended in France. And that is all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.